Welcome to Morning Message for March the 4th. Way back in the early 80s, I had a friend who was a photographer, and he wanted to increase his portfolio of scenic pictures, picturesque scenes of the Maritimes. And so he was going to do a trip around the Cabot Trail and invited me to tag along. And I didn't really need to place a condition on it, but I said I'd be happy to do that if he would teach me more about photography. I wanted to start to take pictures that looked artistic rather than just snapshots of a seagull on a post or whatever it was. And he agreed to do that, and he agreed to teach me a little bit about photography. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was his teaching style or my learning style or whatever. I quickly grew bored of apertures and f-stops and whatever else he was trying to say to me as he was trying to teach me photography. But it was a fun trip for me. It wasn't all that much fun for him, not because he was teaching me, but he was there to increase his portfolio. And the whole time we were on the Cabot Trail, it was exactly the wrong kind of overcast to get any kind of good pictures or memorable pictures of the Cabot Trail. But still, he tried for 2 days. We were driving around Cape Breton, and particularly the Cabot Trail, trying to get these wonderful, iconic pictures that people are used to. So in my boredom, I started turning my back on my friend who was taking the pictures as he was looking out over some wonderful vista. I turned my back and took a picture in the opposite direction. Whatever it was, it didn't matter what it was. It could have been whatever. One of the pictures I took, I still have, and I keep it in my album of pictures. It's a picture on the Cabot Trail of some discarded soup cans. And I think my friend would agree that the best picture that was taken that whole weekend was that one of the soup cans. It's not what you'd expect to see of the Cabot Trail. When I used to show pictures to friends in Toronto when I was living there, this picture would come up in my album, and I'd just say, "Oh, that's the Cabot Trail," as if that explained everything. So I don't really know if it was my personality that caused me to turn my back and to photograph whatever was behind my friend, or if that was the start of me learning to look at things a little bit differently than everybody else. It might be one of the things that it causes me to often think in puns. I hear puns even when they aren't intended. There's a commercial on television right now. It's for one of the restaurants that does a breakfast. And there's some guy standing there says, "You can't beat a fresh egg." Well, I hear that. Well, of course you can. How else are you going to make scrambled eggs? People beat eggs all the time. That's not what he means, but that's the sort of thing that I hear. But looking at the world that way, trying to look at what people aren't looking at, and trying to, or even by accident, hearing puns that aren't there, it helps to bring into perspective other people's points of view. And I think that that's really important. When Jesus tells us in John's Gospel, chapter 13, verse 34, I'm trying to remember that, I think the quote is, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also should love one another." I think that there's many things that we could say about love. There's many things that are included in our idea of love, and many of them, of course, are appropriate. But I think that a part of love is attempting to see things from somebody else's perspective, trying to see things the way that they see things, trying to feel things the way that they feel things. And I think the more we try to do that, the more it kind of becomes natural for us to do that as well. We find ourselves thinking and feeling from other people's points of view without even really trying to do it. It just is something that comes natural to us. I think when we begin to do that, when we begin to experience the humanity in one another, then it's a lot more difficult to fight. It's a lot more difficult to hate. It's a lot more difficult to get into rows over whose parking space that happens to be, or who has the right of way on the road, or whatever dispute might be happening to us individually or to us as countries or whatever. When we begin to see one another's points of view, we begin to understand what one another is going through. And that ability comes out of an ability to love. And that's exactly what Jesus is asking us to do, is to love one another, to see the world from other people's perspectives, not always thinking of it in terms of a selfish, me first kind of way, but understanding how the circumstances we're facing affect all sorts of people. It can lead to some wonderful puns, but it can also lead to an increased sense of love. And pretty soon that other person whose perspective we're seeing begins to see our perspective as well. And that's ultimately what leads to the peace that God calls us to. And that's my hope and prayer for us. That's my hope and prayer for the world, that we all come to a more peaceful circumstance because of the new perspective we're willing to see from one another, and the love that we have for one another. God bless. Amen.